So let's start there. So Romans 10, verses 9 through 15. Because if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. For with the heart one believes and is justified, and with the mouth one confesses and is saved. For the scripture says, everyone who believes in him will not be put to shame. For there is no distinction between Jew and Greek, for the same Lord is Lord of all, bestowing his riches on all who call on him. For everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. How then will they call on him in whom they have not believed? And how are they to believe in him of whom they have not heard? And how are they to hear without someone preaching? And how are they to preach unless they are sent? As it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who preach good news. So just starting with the gospel, right? The foundation for everything, the foundation for being Christian, the foundation for what you need before you're Christian, the foundation of what you need after you become Christian, foundation for missions, right? Everything, the foundation is the gospel. The gospel is the most amazing thing. It's one of those things that, everything else in life, it follows the law of diminishing marginal utility, right? The more you look at it, the more you use it, the less precious it gets. The gospel is opposite. The more you look at it, the more you handle it, the more you kind of let that live in your life, the more and more amazing it gets. It was amazing when I first heard it. It was more amazing a few years later. It's more amazing now than it's ever been in my life. The simplicity of the gospel is something that a child can understand, but the complexity, the depth, the way in which it, in a good way, infects every part of your life, I think it's just absolutely amazing. Verse 9-10 says, because if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. That's the gospel. Simple. Confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord. Believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead. What do you need to be saved? That's it. Irene and I, we were doing some dining hall outreach in Thailand. They call them canteens. So on the campuses, there are canteens everywhere, and that's sort of where a lot of people meet. The food there is so cheap. Average meal, like $2 maybe, $1.50. So how can you not have 2 meals, right? So for outreach, of course, multiple rounds, right? So I had multiple rounds every single meal. So. And so we got to meet a lot of people, and I found that almost every time that the conversation progressed to the point of sharing the gospel, like it's easy for us to do because they're like, why are you here? And then we can just kind of get into it, right? I found that I found myself drawn to this passage in its simplicity and the difference between the gospel and Buddhism. Right? That country is 90-something% Buddhist. And what I end up talking about a lot, actually, when I share the gospel is the concept of do versus done. In every religion, except in Christianity, unless Christianity is done wrong, which actually happens a lot, I guess, but is the difference between do versus done, right? So in every religion, it's do. Like you have to do. You have to earn it. You have to become good enough. In Buddhism, it's all about like karma, right? Like every good thing that you do like gets you good karma, and every bad thing that you do, it's like bad karma. And so you have to balance that out as much as you can. You want to be on the positive side of the ledger as much as you can, right? Every religion is about doing. Like you have to earn that. You have to be good enough. And the question at the end of the day is like, are you good enough? What's your ledger? Who decides? All of that is very mysterious, actually. And so there's a lot of uncertainty, kind of hand-waving, hoping, versus the very simple gospel, which tells you exactly how you can be saved. And actually, it has nothing to do with how good you are. In the gospel, it's done for you. Jesus died on the cross, paying the penalty for your sin, and it is done for you. You don't have to be good enough. You don't have to earn. You don't have to worry whether or not you've done enough to earn salvation at the end of the day. It's one of those things that's like, almost every spiritually interested person that we talked to, they were like, that sounds too good to be true. How is that even possible? Because their whole life, they're like, is this going to work? Am I going to make it? We don't have to earn our place. We don't need to get to a good enough place. We just have to acknowledge that Jesus is Lord and believe in our heart that God raised him from the dead. For with the heart, right, with the heart, one believes and is justified. You're justified by what you believe, right? Not just intellectual belief, but putting your trust in, right? Living into that reality, right? And with the mouth, one confesses. What do you confess? You confess that Jesus is Lord, and you're saved. There are a lot of times during our teen times when people were sharing, and people got to that point where they're like, this is amazing news. This is amazing news. But they weren't sure if they could believe it. Not because it was like too unbelievable, but because they realized like, if they did this, everything would change. And I think because they understood this, like, it is confessing with your mouth that Jesus is Lord. The simple gospel that tells us we don't have to earn, but that everything will change. Like, this is something that you have access to, and I hope that you treasure that. You treasure that reality, that you have that. You don't have to worry. You don't have to wonder if at the end of your life when you reach judgment, whether or not you'll be accepted. You don't have to wonder whether I've done good enough or not good enough. It's not based on that. It's based on what Jesus has done, right? And in that reality, we can have freedom. So the next verse says, for the scripture says, everyone who believes in him will not be put to shame, right? What shame? Well, Romans is talking a lot about justification of, works versus faith. So the shame in sort of finding out that what you put your trust in didn't work, right? So again, in the context of Romans, is sort of putting your faith in your works, which does not work, and it will lead you to shame. That's the case, I think, with all works-based systems. I look at sort of all the idols in Thailand, and it brings me deep sadness. We went to this museum. The first thing we did was we went to this museum called the Museum of Siam, and the whole museum was all about how to explain Thai-ness, Thai-Ness, right? Like, what does it mean to be Thai? And it was such a fascinating museum. It didn't really answer the question, what is Thai-ness, even though it asked it many, many times. But at the end of the day, what they were saying was they absorb things from other cultures and they like integrate it into their own. So they absorb things and they integrate into their own. So we went to this religious room, okay? And this religious room has like all these different idols in it. And at first it's the idols that you'd expect. So like little Buddhas, and fat Buddhas and whatever. Like I don't quite get all of that, but all different kinds of Buddhas. And then you get the elephant, right? The elephant and like all different kinds of elephants and whatever. But then like it gets really weird as you kind of walk around that room, because the whole thing with Thai-ness is that you like absorb things. So suddenly you have stuff like Barbie dolls that are idols, or weird dolls. One of the FM team members, oh man, there's so many stories about the FM team members and their daily kind of difficulties in life. But one of them is that as they're going to DT, they sometimes get chased by dogs, stray dogs, and they think that it was because those dogs are cursed. They're demon dogs. They call them demon dogs. Because Ben Wynn, one of the FM team members, cursed one of the idols that were on the street. So if you're just walking down the street, you'll see random shrines, tiny little shrines. One of these shrines was this like weird doll, and it's just on like this telephone pole thing, and then all around that doll is like incense and like little drinks that they offer up. So he was like walking by this random, and he's cursed it, like in the name of Jesus, right? So anyway, the day after, these dogs started chasing him. He's like, oh no, yeah. So you got these weird, like Doraemon. Do you guys know what Doraemon is? Yeah, apparently that's an idol now. So they'll like worship Doraemon, like. So they like to. Oh, apparently Thailand is the fourth biggest market for Fanta. Did you guys know that? Isn't that weird? You know why? It is the main drink of offering. Yeah. Red Fanta, orange Fanta. Like every little shrine that you see, there's always Fanta. I guess the gods are thirsty. And I guess they like Fanta. I don't know what it is about Fanta, but anyway. So it reminded me of this passage, okay? I don't know if you guys, this is one of the funniest passages in Scripture for me because of kind of its snarkiness. Isaiah 44, he cuts down cedars, or he chooses a cypress tree or an oak and lets it grow strong among the trees of the forest. He plants a cedar and the rain nourishes it. Then it becomes fuel for a man, right? It's okay, yeah. He takes part of it, he warms himself. He kindles a fire and bakes bread. Oh, also, he makes a god and worships it. He makes it an idol and falls down before it. Half of it he burns in the fire. Over the other half, he eats meat. He roasts it and is satisfied. Also, he warms himself and says, aha, I am warm. I have seen the fire. And the rest of it he makes into a god, his idol, and falls down and worships it. And he prays to it and says, deliver me, for you are my God. They know not, nor do they discern, for he has shut their eyes so that they cannot see, and their hearts so that they cannot understand. No one considers, nor is there knowledge or discernment to say, half of it I burned in the fire. I also baked bread on its coals. I roasted meat and have eaten. Shall I make the rest of it an abomination? Shall I fall down before a block of wood? He feeds on ashes. The deluded heart has led him astray. He cannot deliver himself or say, is there not a lie in my right hand? And shrine after shrine after shrine, I could not get over this feeling, right? Like, what is this? What is it that people are bowing down to? A little Barbie doll, a Doraemon stuffed animal. This is what they think will deliver them, right? Like, man, I need to do well in this test. This is what they think will deliver them. And I thought, man, surely we're not that crazy, right? Surely we don't place our trust in things that will fail. Surely we won't place our trust in things that will lead to shame. We don't trust things that to deliver us that are not God. Of course we do. Of course we have idolatries in America. It's just harder to see because we're in it. I think from someone outside of a certain cultural standpoint, you can enter into Thailand and say, whoa, what are you guys doing? This is crazy. But for them, it's not crazy because that's what they've been doing their whole lives. And so it's easy for us to come and criticize that. You take a look at yourself and you go, wait a minute, do I do something that crazy? Actually, we do, all the time. It's just that we're not able to see that so clearly because we're in it. How many people fall at the altar of money, career, and academic success, thinking that it will deliver them, putting their trust in it only for it to eventually lead to shame? If you haven't gotten there yet, you will. It will not deliver you. It will only bring you shame. How about the altar of sex or the altar of romance? Thinking that this other person is going to deliver you. And those things have become idols. Only God can fulfill you. Only trust in God will not lead you to shame. Everything else is an idol. How do you know when something is an idol? How do you know when something is an idol in your life? I think it's a question that we have to ask ourselves all the time. The issue that the Bible talks about more than any other issue is idolatry. Right? The first two commandments, what is it about? You shall have no other God before me. You shall not have any other idols before me. Why are those the first two commandments? Because this is the propensity of the human heart to always put our trust in things that are not God. Now, how do you know when something is an idol in your life? It's a question you have to always ask yourself because this is the thing that your heart is always going to be doing. Right? The heart is an idol-making factory. A couple things I think you can ask yourself to know whether something is an idol in your life. What are you willing to sacrifice in order to get it? Right? What are you willing to sacrifice in order to get it? I think the thing that you sacrifice most for is the thing that you trust the most. And then, how do you respond when you lose it? How do you respond when you lose it? I think that's a really, that's reality, right? Like, how do you respond when you lose something, a job, you get a bad grade, you lose versus, I don't know, like what if there's a sin in your heart and you're losing your relationship with God? Does that fill you with the same like sadness or angst? Right? How do you feel when you lose it? Sometimes losing your idol is the wake-up call that you need to get back down to the foundations. Is your salvation enough? Is Christ enough for you? Is the fact that you can simply believe that God raised Jesus from the dead and confess that he is the Lord, is that enough for you? That your eternity is secure, that you can have a reconciled relationship with God forever. Is that enough for you? I think sometimes that's the process that we need to go through. If you put your trust in believing in him, you will never be put to shame. If you put your trust in anything else, it will lead to shame because it will never fulfill you. Verse 12, there is no distinction between Jew and Greek, for the same Lord is Lord of all, bestowing his riches on all who call on him. Sometimes to get over the idols, you got to look bigger, okay? Look bigger, look past yourself. That was sort of one of the main themes of our DT sharings during the trip, right? Is sort of to look past yourself, right? You have the riches of the gospel, and the gospel breaks down barriers between cultures. The same Lord is Lord of all, right? Like at that time, the Jew and the Greek were so opposed culturally. And yet, what does the gospel do? It brings people together from any culture. One of people's favorite times during our trip was the fellowship that we got to have with the Thai brothers and sisters. It was really amazing how close you can feel to someone who you've never met before, simply because we serve the same Lord. I was really, really challenged by the sisters at the Mahapan church that we went to the last couple days that we were there. We partnered with the church, and they're doing campus ministry. They had a bunch of like staffers, I guess, people who went full time to sort of serve the church. And I think what one of the ladies there said was that there's 17 sisters and 3 brothers who are the staff of that church. And these are, so mostly we kind of were working with the women there, and they were age range like 23 and then to older. So here's one of them. Her name is Dada, and these 2 sisters, they work on the Rang State University campus. At that place, they had like 4 different universities ranging in size, some 2,000, but some of them were 20,000 students. And they have 2 workers on each campus, 2 workers. And these 2 ladies started 3 different campus groups to try to drum up business, basically. So one of them is a Christian club, but, Buddhist country, it's really hard to get people to come to a Christian club. So they tried different forms of outreach. So one of them is a volunteer, a service volunteer kind of outlet, and one of them is a frisbee club, sort of a way to like draw people in. These 2 ladies are running 3 clubs by themselves. And I thought, my goodness, we're so lucky how many other co-laborers that we have on one campus. You know, we have our college team, we have our international team, like we're like all working. And it feels like it's hard, and it is hard. But then I look at these women, I'm like, oh my gosh, we have nothing to complain about. These women, they pretty much know that it's going to be really hard for them to get married. Given the number of Christians who are in that country, and then even the number of male workers, right, 17 to 3. Man, I just, one of them, she was like the translator for us during the gospel night. She was sharing her story with me as we were kind of working on different things, but she actually studied abroad in England for a couple years, trying to get her master's, and it was going to be a lucrative thing. Her family's in debt by quite a lot of money. But as she was out there, she was sort of losing her faith, and she felt called by God to go into full-time ministry. And so she didn't finish her degree. Halfway through, she said, I got to do this. And so she left, she came back, and now she's in full-time ministry. And she's still got to try to figure out how to do this with her family, because her family's still quite a lot in debt. But she was overflowing with joy. This event that we had, they had set everything up for us. They made a flyer for us. They did all that kind of legwork, all the outreach. They had 260 signups before we even got there. And, you know, of course, the selling point is like Americans are coming, right? So, I asked her to share the gospel in Thai because I think there's something powerful about it being in sort of in the native language. So she was like so thankful afterwards. Like, I'm so thankful that you guys came. So thankful we got people to come. I've never shared the gospel with that many people in my life. And she was just overflowing with joy, despite all that she gave up to do this. We got to worship together that first night, and just they had a list of prayer requests for every campus that they were going to. You know, very specific prayer requests, and like you could tell, they love their campuses, they love their people. They wanted us to pray. Like, please, can you pray for us? And the fellowship that we enjoyed with them, because they love the Lord, and they sacrificed for Him. It was just a beautiful, beautiful thing. You know, one of the sisters, she faced rejection from her family. They got disowned by her family because of her faith, because she did this. And her response was, "But I have the Lord. I have the Lord." And that made all the difference for her. And I was so thankful to have met them. Verse 13 says, "For everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved." Everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. Again, that's just an amazing thing. Any culture, any age, anyone, everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. And so we got to experience some pretty awesome salvation decisions while we're out there. One thing that we were affirmed of again and again is this quote from Adoniram Judson: "If we succeed without suffering, it is because others suffered before us. If we suffer without succeeding, it will mean others will succeed after us. But there can be no success without suffering." In a country that's 1% Christian, we set a faith goal with our team of 200 gospel conversations, and we were able to blow past that, thankfully, I think, because people were just so zealous to talk to people. But for many of those conversations, it was the first time they had ever heard the gospel. Like, what a privilege to be able to share that. And a lot of people were like, "This is amazing, but wow, this is so new. I'm not sure about this," which I think is a pretty reasonable response. A lot of the salvation decisions that we experienced, it turns out someone in their past had already shared the gospel with them, either through school or through a missionary encounter or something. They referenced like, "Oh yeah, I heard this before sometime." And again, it was a reminder, wow, like any success, quote unquote, any reaping that we've done, it's really because others have sown before. And then we get to sow. Maybe we're the first person to share the gospel, and they're like, whoa, this is new. But maybe someone down the line is going to be able to share the gospel with them again. And they'll reference, oh yeah, there's this really weird like American people who came and like shared this with me and like kind of left a pebble in my shoe for me to think about. And I've been thinking about it for a long time. And then finally they get to kind of respond later, right? So we got to, I might have counted wrong, but we got to experience 9 different salvation decisions while we're out there in Thailand. And I think that's just amazing given that it's a 1% Buddhist country. And like, what did we do? I mean, I suppose you could say it was a little bit of suffering, 2 weeks, right? Of like waking up and like going out there and like sweltering heat and like constantly sweating, you know, all the guys at the end of the day is like salt stains everywhere, you know what I'm saying? Like, so suffering, yeah, I guess a little bit, but 2 weeks. And we got to experience 9 salvations. Like, that is amazing. So first salvation decision we experienced out there is a guy named Tin. Ben had met him. This is Ben. He has served in the Berkeley church and then later in the Boston church. This is Christian, as you guys know. This is Cody from LA. So Ben had met Tin playing volleyball a couple weeks ago before we got there. They had sort of had a side conversation. He had asked him if he had ever heard of Christianity. He said no, they went through the gospel acrostic, but only got through G&O at that conversation. And then they scheduled a gospel appointment for the following Wednesday. Except Ben got sick, so they had to cancel that one. So then the following Wednesday was when SLT was there. So then they finally were able to meet. First question that Ben asked him was, if you could ask Buddha one thing, what would it be? Okay, so I mean, normally in America we say God, right? But like it's easier that way. So anyway, and his response was, why suffering, right? The question of suffering. So conversation shifted to Christianity, discussed the problem of pain from the Christian perspective, which I think is so much more hopeful than the Buddhist perspective. The problem of pain in Buddhism is like, well, detached from the world, or actually it's your fault from a previous life. Like, it's so hopeless, right? Well, the Christian perspective, it's like, well, there's a redemption to that suffering. There's a God who suffered with you, and then there's, of course, hope for heaven in the future. Like, it's just, anyway, so they talked about that. They talked about origins, the beginning, which again, Buddhism has no answer for. They talked about eternity and the end, which again, Buddhism has no answer for. So talked about science, they talked about faith, they talked about Big Bang Theory. They did 3 circles, 1.5-hour version. And every like kind of, they gave a chance for him to ask questions, and he would reference things from the beginning of the conversation, which again showed that he was tracking, he was listening. You know, they asked him the golden question. They asked it in 4 different ways, just to make sure. You know, he said yes. And he asked about the church, kind of saying how amazing the church sounds compared to the temple, you know, which has no sense of community. It's like so different. He started calling these guys Pichai, which means like older brother, you know. And then he really wanted to meet us, so we got to meet him like at one of our team times and stuff. This conversation was started because of ping pong. I think Joey was playing ping pong and he was like beating everybody. So that was good because then the other guys were able to have conversations with people on the side, right? Started with a guy named Ken, and then they talked about, okay, why he's here, whatever. And then he said that he's helping with a club that asks the big questions in life, which he then immediately responded with, what's the meaning and purpose of my life? And so they started talking about, well, it's the beginning, right? So course 101, you have to know what the beginning is to understand what the purpose is, what is the nature of the world, what is the nature of man. As they were talking, Ken's friend overhears, and he says, hey, are you guys talking about the purpose of life? Can I join in? Sure. So then they start talking. As they were talking, a third person, unrelated to either of those guys, goes, hey, you guys talking about the purpose of life? Like, can I join in? Like, sure. So it's Ken and his friend and some other third person who nobody had ever met before, talking with these guys about the purpose of life, okay? They go through the gospel acrostic. They all understand that they're sinners. They start realizing, okay, there must have been a creator. And then they talk about Jesus. And turns out, and I referenced this earlier, but Ken earlier on had attended a Thai Christian school, but never understood like why they would pray, didn't understand the concept of the gospel until kind of finally it all kind of clicked during this conversation. And so And then one of the other guys had been reading self-help books, but felt like they didn't help. Said, yeah, this sounds great, but I can't do this. And so he was starting to feel hopeless about and then all of that clicked at that conversation, and all three of them made decisions at that conversation. Here's another guy, his name is Dart, that these guys were able to meet. And so it's really, really amazing, like how people responded. When you understand the simplicity of the gospel and what it can do in your life, the relational aspect of who God is, all of that, like spiritually hungry people just started to respond. So, okay, so this is amazing. This promise is absolutely amazing. Everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. Well, how is that going to happen? And the rest of the passage goes into that, right? How will they call on him, right? Because everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. Well, how are they going to call on him if they don't believe in him? That's true, right? Before you call on the name of the Lord, you have to believe in him. Well, how are they believe if they've never heard? So many of the people we talk to, this is the first time they've ever heard the gospel. Well, you can't call on the name of the Lord. You can't believe in the Lord unless you hear, right? Well, how are they to hear without someone telling them what the gospel is? Well, how are they to, unless somebody is sent? We're just kind of walking through this, right? How beautiful are the feet of those who preach good news. Everyone who calls in the name of the Lord will be saved. But how are they going to get there unless somebody is sent? Unless somebody is sent to preach. Because when you are sent, then you can preach. And when you preach, then possibly this person will hear. And when they hear, then possibly this person might believe. And if they believe, then possibly this person might call on the name of the Lord and be saved. That all happens if you're sent. How beautiful are the feet of those who preach the good news. Who was sent? It's you, right? It's you. It's you. It's me. We're all sent. We're all called to be sent. You don't need a special calling to be sent. God has called all of you to be sent. How beautiful are the feet of those who bring the good news. I think this message was very, very clear to me in Thailand because we were on our feet a lot. Our feet were not beautiful at the end of the night, but they were beautiful in that they were sent to bring the good news to people. It's never easy to share the gospel. It's never easy to be sent. But man, like the travel required for that team. I feel for the Thailand team. I think because of the amount of travel they have to do to get to any campus. The closest campus is 30 minutes away. You have to take this thing called a songtail, which is like a pickup truck with like a roof in the back that you like hang on to some poles. Or the next closest campus is about 45 minutes away, taking a train to get there. The next closest campus is about an hour and a half away. You have to take a train, then transfer, and take another train to get there. Just to bring the good news. Like the amount of travel that we have to do just to get to a campus to share the good news was worth it. Every single time it was worth it. To be able to share with someone that there's a God who loves them, that there's hope for the future, there's a way in which you can live your life so that you never have to be worried about what will happen to you at the end of your life. There's a purpose and a meaning and a future for you. Who was sent? You were sent. If you're, as you hear these stories, you're like, man, I wish I had gone, don't worry. You have an opportunity. Welcome Week is coming. Welcome Week is coming. It's one of the most astounding, mission fields ever. Thousands of students are going to be descending on this campus at once. Most of them do not know their right hand from their left hand, morally. Most of them are bowing down to idols, the idols of money, career, academic success, and romance. Most of them are enslaved to idolatries that will put them to shame eventually. They just haven't experienced it yet. Or maybe they have and they keep going back to it. And you have an opportunity to be sent. You don't have to go thousands of miles taking a plane. You can go a couple 100 feet that way and meet thousands of people. How beautiful are the feet of those who bring the good news. It's not easy. It's not easy to do, but it's very simple. How is this possible to do? I think God instituted the church for many reasons, but I think this is one of the reasons. Because it's really, really hard to do alone. One thing that I'm always interested in is the lives of missionaries, and I think there are some missionaries who are just amazing, amazing people. You think about guys like Adoniram Judson. He talks about suffering, man. That guy suffered like crazy decades before the first convert. Lost his wife, lost many children on the mission field. And I think there are people whose faith is so huge, especially anointed by God, to be able to do that. I think the vast majority of Christians cannot do that. It's too hard. And again, as I listen to kind of the reality of people on the mission field who've been there for years and years and years, Thailand, they call it a missionary graveyard because it's so hard. It's so hard. People seem open initially, but spiritually it's really hard. Really interesting stuff that we found out about even the language. It turns out there's no direct translation in Thailand, in the Thai language for purpose, fulfillment, or sadness. The word for sadness in Thai is crying. There's no word for sadness. Just a cultural barrier of trying to approach that. So what happens to a lot of missionaries, apparently, they go to Thailand, they try, and then they move to service ministries. So trying to help the poor and all of these kinds of things. Not that that's bad. But in a sense, they've shifted from the mission, right? Why is that? Because it was so hard. It was so hard. What will enable us to be sent? I think it's each other, right? The fact that we have each other. The fact that you, after maybe rejection after rejection, at least have a friend to be rejected together with. And our team times at the end of the night where, maybe 30 of us had many rejections, but 2 of us, man, we found someone who was spiritually open. And we got to do that together. And again, after the experience of seeing so many people working alone or in such a smaller team, I don't want to take for granted what we have. We have each other. Let's not just be that holy huddle where we just kind of enjoy each other and enjoy each other's company, enjoy each other's community. That's good. That's what God gave us the church for, but not the only thing, right? God called us to be a people who can share the gospel through our relationships and then help each other as we do so, right? So just some numbers that I just found amazing. I think stats kind of help me put things into perspective. So we had 26 people go to Thailand, 12 FM team members, 4 kids, We hit 10 campuses in those 2 weeks. We had 3 gospel nights. We took 10 different modes of transportation, including a river taxi. That was pretty cool. And then the bus system, which was terrible. Overall, roughly, we took about 650 train rides, okay, team-wide. Because a lot of times you have to take two trains transferring to get to somewhere. We had over 250 gospel conversations, and then 9 decisions in those 2 weeks. And many, many others who were spiritually interested, who wanted to keep discussing, right? Take course 101, like things like that. I think that's just blows my mind how we were able to do that. Many people in their post-mission trip reflection wrote, there's no way that we could have done that alone. Just the motivation after getting rejected 14 times in one day, it doesn't feel good, but we were able to do it together. All the gospel nights that we put on, we can only do that together. You can go on a mission trip this welcome week. For all the people who are working, if you can, I challenge you to just take days off. It is the best time. It is the most important weekend of ministry, that move-in weekend. If you're a student, I know you guys have your own things that you have to take care of. Take care of those things. Get your life in order. But man, if you want to affect eternities, if you want to bring people out of the life of idolatry, this is the weekend. This is the weekend to pour your heart, your time, your energy. I treat it like a mission trip. We're working all day, and then we have team times every night, right, to help refresh and restore. And then, we eat good food all throughout too, so because we need that, right? But this is a weekend, and you get to participate in eternity. You get to help someone say, I believe in my heart God raised Jesus from the dead. I confess that he is Lord. If you help someone do that, they're with Jesus for eternity. There's nothing better that you can do with your life. And this is the weekend to do that.